Hello, okay, for those of you returning to the channel, welcome back. And for those of you that are new here, that have just stumbled upon this video, then thank you for joining me. And if you find yourself wanting to stick around to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV, then please hit that subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. And yeah, welcome to my spoiler-free review of crime thriller Crime 101, written and directed by Bart Layton and based on the 2020 novella of the same name. I've never read the novella in which the film is based on, so I'm not going to be able to compare this adaptation to that original story. So the story follows a master jewel thief whose string of heists along the 101 freeway has confounded police. Eyeing the score of a lifetime, his path collides with a conflicted insurance broker while a relentless detective closes in. So yeah, you have quite a straightforward and basic story here. It's not trying to do anything new or groundbreaking. You know, you have your typical cat and mouse story with this jewel thief was going for this one last big job, and you know, he's being hunted by this detective who's obsessed with sort of this string of crimes that have been committed along the 101 freeway. And so it is a very familiar story that isn't that complex, and that really doesn't matter here because it works. What you've got here is a very tight story that, yeah, is 2 hours and 20 minutes long, but it works. It wraps you up within its story. It swallows you up within the world in which it's based with these characters. And I was there from beginning to end. I was immersed within these characters' journeys and their stories as a result of how this story was constructed and brought to life from, you know, a technical perspective, from a visual perspective, as well as the performances and just how the narrative was constructed. Yes, it's familiar. Yes, it's not doing anything new or groundbreaking. It has a very basic and straightforward plot where we've been here before. But it's what they explore with these characters in regards to its themes and their stories, and in how that plays out is what makes Crime 101 such a satisfying and compelling experience. Like, don't get me wrong, I feel like I did want a little bit more meat when it came to our characters and sort of their stories, but there's just enough here to just really kind of pull you along and get you involved with their stories. Or at least it was for me anyway, and I found it to be an incredibly gripping and immersive experience. I think they do a wonderful job. Whether this was intentional or not, I don't know, but I feel like they've done a wonderful job in sort of capturing the essence of 90s crime thrillers, where it has that kind of stripped back approach, but it has characters that you can get behind and be invested with because of how they are brought to life through the performances as well as the writing. You know, it's a world that feels lived in with real characters, and it's a very tight script. I think it's a very clever script. Like I said, I kind of wanted just a little bit more meat, maybe when it came to each of our characters, whether that be the detective played by Mark Ruffalo or Chris Hemsworth as this jewel thief. And I think Barry Keoghan's character suffers the most, but it's also a character that still works within its story and still has an impact. And I just feel Crime 101 is a good example, among many other good examples, of having a very familiar story, a story that we've been to a million times before, but still be satisfying, but still be effective at immersing you into its world and into these characters' journeys. And Crime 101 is a good example of that, where you don't always need to try and to try and do something completely different or new within a certain genre. But sometimes all you need is to get the basics right, and that is the writing and its characters and their stories and the story that you're attempting to tell, and whatever themes you're attempting to explore within that story. And that's why, for me, Crime 101 works, because of how these characters were written, how they were brought to life, whether it be Barry Keoghan or Mark Ruffalo or Halle Berry or Chris Hemsworth, everyone gives a solid performance here and brings these characters to life in a way that feels real. And you could feel the pain and sort of, the torment that's going on within them, and just how these characters' journeys sort of collide within the story. I just thought was very satisfying. It was very compelling, and like I said, it never gets too complex. This is pretty straightforward, but it never loses sight of those themes in which they are exploring within its story. It's not the most intense experience ever, but not everything needs to be, incredibly emotionally intense. And yeah, it was just enough for me to really sort of be immersed and stay immersed within these stories, within these journeys, and to have an experience that does feel incredibly satisfying. Like, I'm not going to sort of say what happens within the final moments of this movie, but what I will say is, I was grinning. I just had this it was kind of just like a wave of happiness. And I wasn't expected to feel like that by the end of this movie. It's quite a tragic story due to what they are exploring thematically, but I also couldn't help but be overwhelmed with happiness by the end, by the conclusion of the story. And that just really took me by surprise, but also, it fuels sort of the satisfaction that I had with this movie, with this story. It takes me back to a certain era of filmmaking, especially with just how sort of the setting and the world is brought to life visually with the lighting. And I just loved how this movie was brought to life from a visual perspective, just in how the world of LA is brought to life within the frame through the cinematography, where you've got all these sort of different textures of LA that just adds this grit and groundedness to the overall experience, and just how the camera would be used within certain moments, which would aid sort of in the immersion of its story. I absolutely admire this film from a visual perspective in how the story was told through visuals, because it adds so much to sort of the tension within the story, and it also, through the visuals, really does a wonderful job at conveying what these characters are going through in their lives. All these characters, whether it be Chris Hemsworth's character, the jewel thief, or, this insurance broker, Halle Berry, or the detective played by Mark Ruffalo, they've all hit a certain point in their lives where they've come to this crossroads. And so in many ways, you've got, three completely different characters here, but they're all sort of going through the same kind of emotions, you could say, and feelings due to sort of this crossroads that they've sort of come to in their lives, and just how that is conveyed through the visuals, and also through the soundtrack as well, the score. I absolutely adored the score here, that again, does a really good job at capturing and conveying what our characters are going through emotionally and mentally. The score is composed by a Blank Mass. I think that's how you pronounce the name. I've never heard of him. But yeah, he does a wonderful job at really kind of, along with the visuals, along with the cinematography, in really kind of adding these layers to the story, adding a sort of a richness to the world in which it's being brought to life, and a depth that kind of really kind of conveys and captures what our characters are going through. And that is something that I really admired about this movie. And to just touch back on that minor niggle I had, yes, I kind of wanted just a little bit more when it came to certain characters, like Barry Keoghan's character, for example. That's the one that kind of really stood out to me, that I found myself craving just a little bit more when it came to finding out who this character is. But at the same time, it works because of a mix of other different elements, whether it be the writing, that very clever, tight script, or the performance by Barry Keoghan that sort of, you know, through his performance, he displays so much, he says so much about his character, and he is very mesmerising when he's on the screen. I loved what he was doing with the character, and that kind of just fueled my want, really, of, you know, needing just a little bit more. But I also recognised that it was working. You know, they knew exactly what they were doing when it came to telling this story. The film is very, you know, aware, and it knows what it wants to do, you know, and in how it wants to tell this story. You know, you kind of get a basic understanding of where these characters are at. And you'll get these moments between characters where, you know, yeah, you get a good understanding of where they're at, but it's not too concerned by getting bogged down by the kind of the sort of the more complex and deeper aspects of its story. Like, they are there, but it's there just enough to sort of still work for the overall experience. You know, it's a very classic, traditional approach to telling a story like this, where never loses sight of its themes, of those kind of the more deeper human stories that they're exploring, but it doesn't get bogged down by them either. And I think it tells a story that a lot of people are going to be able to connect to, and it does it in a satisfying way. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed Crime 101. I was quite looking forward to it from the trailers, and it didn't disappoint. I really, really enjoyed this experience. Just loved how this story was constructed from a technical perspective, and in just, you know, and in how everyone brought their characters to life, and sort of just the story that they were telling you. And you've got all these kind of mix of different ingredients that, yeah, tells a very familiar story that that doesn't do anything groundbreaking or new, but it's still a very satisfying experience that takes you on this journey, that pulls you along with these characters, and I remained immersed. Do I have mine and niggles with it? Yes, but overall it was very satisfying. So yeah, they are my thoughts on Crime 101, and I will be giving Crime 101... my thoughts on Crime 101, but what did you guys think? Have you seen it yet? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? And please let me know in the comments below, and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And remember, if you find yourself wanting to stick around to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV, then please hit that subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. And just another big thank you to everyone that is connecting and supporting the channel, whether that be liking, commenting, subscribing. It means the world to me. I've got a couple of trailer reviews on the way. One of them is for Star Wars, Mandalorian and Grogu, as well as Lee Cronin's The Mummy. And so I'm looking forward to sharing with you all my thoughts on those trailers, and sort of from the glimpses that we get from within those movies. Two of my anticipated movies of the year. So yeah, that's enough rambling from me for now. Thank you guys for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'll be catching you guys soon.